The conference room smelled faintly of fresh coffee and carpet cleaner, that odd mix that always reminded Selena Johnson of long hours and longer sacrifices. She sat at the oval table, fingers pressed together so tightly her knuckles turned white. 10 years. 10 years of late nights, skipped vacations, and relentless deadlines had led to this morning. Around her, chatter buzzed like static. Colleagues leaned toward her with hopeful smirks, some whispering, "It's your turn, Selena," as though the promotion had already been written in stone. She nodded politely, but inside her chest, her heart beat like a drum. She wanted to believe them. She needed to believe them. The company had dressed the moment in ceremony. The blinds were half drawn, letting sunlight stripe across the long mahogany table. The CEO's assistant arranged a neat stack of envelopes, one of which contained the announcement that could change Selena's life. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, her name called, the applause erupting, her mother's proud phone call later that night. But when the CEO cleared his throat, something in his tone made Selena's stomach drop. It wasn't excitement. It was rehearsed, practiced, and strangely flat. "We're proud to announce," he said, eyes scanning the room but not settling on her, "that Jessica Miller will step into the role of Senior Project Manager." For a split second, the room seemed to go silent, like someone had pressed mute on reality. Selena blinked. Had she misheard? Jessica? The new hire who'd been here barely a year? The same woman Selena had trained last spring? Polite applause trickled across the room, uneven, hesitant. Selena's palms grew clammy. She forced her lips into a smile, but her throat felt like sandpaper. She clapped, two hollow taps that sounded more like echoes than celebration. Jessica stood, beaming, tossing her blonde hair back as though the crown had been waiting all along. The CEO shook her hand firmly. Cameras clicked from a few eager colleagues capturing the moment. No one was looking at Selena. Her chest tightened. She stared down at her hands, those same hands that had typed countless reports, signed contracts, and carried the weight of projects that kept the company afloat. Now they trembled. She swallowed the question rising inside her, a question that felt heavier than all the years she had poured into this company. Why wasn't I enough? The answer, of course, wasn't written in any envelope. It was written in the silence of the room, in the invisible weight of history, in the way the applause felt forced for Jessica, yet absent for her. She could feel it pressing in on her, that quiet reminder that no matter how hard she worked, some people saw only the color of her skin before they saw her worth. But in that moment, heartbroken, humiliated, trembling, Selena also felt something else spark in her chest, a fire. This story wasn't over. If you've ever been overlooked, if you've ever wondered why hard work wasn't enough, then stay with Selena's story, because what happens next will challenge everything we think we know about fairness at work. Hit that like, drop a comment with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what comes after this shocking betrayal.
Selena Johnson hadn't always dreamed of climbing a corporate ladder. Growing up in Queens, New York, her world was framed by subway tracks and the constant hum of a city that never truly slept. Her mother worked double shifts as a nurse, her father long gone before she could ever remember his face. Selena learned early that nothing, absolutely nothing, would be handed to her. If she wanted stability, she'd have to build it, brick by brick, even if her hands bled in the process. College wasn't easy. Between part-time jobs and relentless coursework, Selena carved out a space for herself in business administration. She was that student who volunteered to lead group projects, who stayed up until 2 a.m. reformatting PowerPoints because sloppy slides weren't acceptable. By the time she graduated, she had the grades, the discipline, and the grit to walk into interviews with her head held high. Landing her first job at the firm felt like victory. It wasn't glamorous, data entry, client calls, menial tasks, but she wore each responsibility like armor. Within her first year, she earned a reputation as the go-to fixer. When systems crashed, Selena stayed late to restore them. When deadlines threatened to sink projects, she sacrificed weekends. When a teammate struggled, she quietly covered the gaps. It wasn't about recognition then. It was about survival, about proving that she belonged in spaces where few women of color were ever invited. But over time, survival turned into sacrifice. Vacations disappeared. Family gatherings became rare visits where her phone buzzed constantly on the dinner table. Her friends teased her about being married to the company, but Selena shrugged it off. This is the price, she thought. One day, it'll be worth it. And for a while, the company seemed to agree. She collected Employee of the Month plaques like trinkets, her name appearing in newsletters praising her contributions. Senior managers dropped hints. Your leadership material, Selena. Stick with us. Your time will come. Her time. The phrase became a mantra, a promise she repeated to herself when exhaustion dragged her down. It was the invisible contract between her and the firm. She gave them everything, and eventually, they would give her the chance to rise. But still, cracks showed in the glossy surface. Meetings where her ideas were brushed aside, only to be repeated later by someone else, someone white, someone male, and suddenly celebrated. Jokes whispered in hallways about her serious face, as if professionalism were a flaw. Diversity posters plastered on the walls for PR campaigns, while actual promotions told another story. Yet Selena chose belief over bitterness. She told herself the system was slow, not broken, that her work would speak louder than prejudice, that fairness, though delayed, was inevitable. So she doubled down. On late nights in the quiet office, when only the glow of her monitor lit the room, Selena whispered the same silent prayer. Let this be enough. Let them see me. Now, sitting in that conference room watching Jessica Miller's name being called, Selena realized how fragile that belief had been. Her decade of dedication had collided with an invisible wall she had always suspected but never wanted to admit was there. And yet this wasn't just Selena's story. It was the story of countless others like her, people who gave everything to companies that measured their value not in effort or achievement, but in comfort with the familiar face across the table. The betrayal stung deeper because of the context. 10 years of loyalty, of silence, of faith in a system that was never designed for her to win. And as she replayed those years in her mind, Selena knew one thing with absolute certainty. If she didn't demand better, nothing would ever change. The weeks leading up to the promotion announcement had felt like the prelude to a long-awaited symphony. Selena could almost hear the crescendo building in her life, each project and late-night grind like notes layering toward a triumphant finale. In January, she had been handed what everyone quietly called a career killer project. A high-profile client was threatening to walk, their dissatisfaction already bleeding into whispers that could ruin the firm's reputation. No one wanted to touch it. No one except Selena. She threw herself into the challenge with the same relentlessness that had defined her career. She studied the client's history, their pain points, even the personalities of their executives. For weeks, she was the first to arrive and the last to leave. She crafted presentations, ran numbers until her eyes blurred, and when one of her teammates dropped the ball, Selena picked it up without complaint. When the day came to present, she didn't just save the account, she expanded it. The client signed a multi-year extension and publicly praised her team's remarkable turnaround. Behind closed doors, everyone knew the truth. It was Selena's leadership that had done it. After that, the tone in the office shifted. Colleagues congratulated her with pats on the back. Some even joked, "Guess we should start calling you boss now." At lunch, whispers of her inevitable promotion buzzed like background music. Even junior employees looked at her with a kind of quiet admiration, as though her success meant something possible for them too. Her manager at the time had all but confirmed it. "Selena, you've proven yourself. Just stay the course." Those words carried her through exhaustion, like fuel poured onto embers of hope. But there were shadows, too. In strategy meetings, subtle comments sliced through her optimism. We need someone with a certain image, one executive had said when discussing client-facing roles. Another remarked, Jessica has that approachable look. Clients respond to it. Selena had pretended not to notice the implication, that her presence, her dark skin, her sharp precision, didn't translate as approachable. Jessica herself seemed harmless enough at first, fresh out of grad school, full of textbook jargon and bright smiles. Selena had trained her, shown her how to navigate the company's messy internal systems. Jessica often thanked her warmly, even called her my work mentor. She accepted it with grace, remembering her own first year. But as months passed, she noticed how quickly Jessica was invited into circles Selena had never been allowed to enter. Casual coffee meetings with executives, invitations to after-hours networking events where decisions were quietly shaped. Selena wasn't bitter. She told herself connections mattered, but results mattered more. And in results, no one could touch her. Still, those moments left hairline cracks in her confidence, cracks she papered over with sheer work ethic. By late spring, the buzz around her promotion was almost deafening. Her department head hinted in an email that she should prepare for exciting changes. HR asked her to update her resume for internal records. Even her mother over Sunday dinner teased her with a smile. Soon I'll be telling everyone my daughter is a manager. She laughed, but her chest swelled with pride. She had earned this. The company couldn't deny her any longer. And yet, deep down, buried beneath her certainty, there lingered a quiet fear, the kind of fear that had followed her since childhood, when teachers questioned whether she really wrote the essays that won her awards. The fear that no matter how flawless her work, someone else could walk in with half her effort and all the privilege she lacked and somehow still take what was hers. As the promotion day neared, she silenced that fear. She chose belief over doubt. Because surely after a decade, the company would finally see her the way she had always seen herself, worthy, capable, undeniable. But reality had other plans.
The moment the CEO's words left his lips, naming Jessica Miller as the new senior project manager, it was as if the air itself had been sucked from the conference room. Selena sat frozen in her chair, her mind refusing to stitch the syllables together into meaning. Jessica? It couldn't be. Jessica had been in the company less than 12 months. She had shadowed Selena on projects, asking questions that betrayed her inexperience. Selena had stayed late to help her craft reports, smoothing rough edges that now gleamed on Jessica's resume. And now Jessica was the one standing at the front, basking in the glow that should have been Selena's? The applause was hesitant at first, then swelled into a rhythm Selena couldn't join. Her hands moved, clapping slowly, mechanically, but the sound felt hollow, like echoes bouncing off the walls of her chest. She tried to smile, the corners of her lips trembling, but she could feel the burn of humiliation searing across her face. Jessica, radiant and wide-eyed, took the floor as though the role had always been hers. "I'm so honored," she chirped, her voice trembling with fake modesty. "I can't wait to keep learning from all of you." She glanced Selena's way, flashing a smile. Was it gratitude or pity? Selena couldn't tell. Selena's vision blurred for a moment. She thought of the years, 10 long years of pouring herself into this company, into people who nodded at her competence, but never truly saw her. She remembered the times her suggestions were drowned out in meetings, only to resurface minutes later when repeated by someone else. She recalled being told to tone it down when she presented too confidently, as though her assertiveness was aggression. The betrayal wasn't just in the title given to Jessica. It was in the silence of her colleagues, those same people who had whispered for weeks that it's Selena's turn. Now their voices joined in applause for Jessica, as if none of those promises had ever been spoken. Her chest tightened, anger and despair warring inside her. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. Around her, laughter and congratulations filled the room, a chorus that drowned out her own racing thoughts. She forced herself to breathe, to stay seated, to not crumble in front of the very people who had just erased her. When the meeting ended, Selena rose slowly, each step heavy, as she walked toward the door. Jessica was already surrounded by a cluster of executives, their smiles wide, their congratulations loud. Not one of them turned to acknowledge Selena as she passed. In the elevator, alone at last, Selena leaned against the mirrored wall. The reflection staring at her looked composed, but her inside screamed. She thought of her mother's words, the sacrifices, the nights she'd whispered, "Just a little longer, it'll be worth it." And for what? Tears stung her eyes, but she blinked them back, swallowing hard. Somewhere inside the humiliation, another feeling sparked, sharp, hot, unrelenting. This wasn't just disappointment. It was a fracture, a betrayal so deep it demanded reckoning. Selena had been erased in plain sight, and the worst part? No one else seemed to notice. Or maybe, she realized with a jolt of clarity, they noticed, and they simply didn't care. That night, long after the office lights dimmed, Selena sat alone at her desk, staring at the empty chair across from hers. Jessica's chair now. The thought was a knife twisting deeper. She clenched her fists and whispered into the empty room. "This isn't the end. Not for me."
The days after the promotion announcement unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare. Selena still came to work, still sat at her desk, still answered emails and attended meetings, but something fundamental had shifted. Where there had once been pride in her stride, now there was weight in her steps. Every "good morning" felt rehearsed, every polite nod from colleagues tinged with pity. Jessica now occupied the corner office that Selena had imagined herself walking into. Its glass walls reflected the skyline, Selena's skyline, but it belonged to someone else. Selena told herself to stay composed. Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you break. Yet inside, the betrayal gnawed at her, hollowing her from the inside out. At lunch, one afternoon, she sat with her closest friend at the company, Marcus. He was one of the few people she trusted, a quiet analyst with a short mind. Marcus leaned across the table and lowered his voice. "Selena, this isn't right. Everyone knows you deserved that spot." She forced a smile, poking at her salad. "Deserve doesn't seem to count for much around here." "You gonna let this slide?" he asked, his eyes burning with the outrage she struggled to show. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to walk out and never come back. Another part says if I leave, they win. That they'll just keep doing this to the next person who looks like me." That night, Selena visited her mother. The small apartment in Queens felt like stepping back into a different life, one where her worth wasn't measured in titles or salaries. Her mother listened as Selena recounted the humiliation, her voice cracking under the weight of her frustration. Her mother reached across the kitchen table, placing a hand over hers. "Baby, you've been carrying this company on your back for years, but you can't let them break you. You've got to decide. Are you going to keep letting them write your story, or are you going to write your own?" The words landed heavy. Selena lay awake later, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment the CEO had named Jessica. Over and over she asked herself if she had done something wrong. Was she too direct? Too ambitious? Too visible? The thought spiraled into darker territory. Maybe she had believed in a dream that was never meant for her. Maybe the ladder she'd been climbing was leaning against a wall that was never supposed to let her over. But then she thought of the younger employees, the interns, the new hires of color, who watched her with quiet admiration. If she disappeared without a fight, what message would that send to them?
That no matter how hard they worked, the system would still crush them in silence? Selena turned on her side, pulling the blanket tighter. The room was dark, but in her chest, a flicker of something new stirred. Not hope exactly, but a stubborn refusal to let this be the final word. The next morning, as she stared at herself in the mirror before work, she didn't recognize the tired woman looking back. Her reflection seemed to ask the same question her mother had asked. Are you going to keep letting them write your story? Selena pressed her palms against the sink and whispered, almost as if making a vow, no, not anymore.
Selena's resolve deepened one sleepless night when, unable to shake her restless thoughts, she opened her laptop and scrolled through old company emails. At first, it was just habit, an anxious attempt to prove to herself she hadn't missed something. But then she saw it. An internal memo buried deep in her inbox, dated weeks before the so-called transparent promotion process had even begun. The subject line was bland, leadership planning. She clicked it, her pulse quickening. The email outlined a list of upcoming leadership placements, and there it was, Jessica's name already assigned to the senior project manager role. Weeks before the interviews, weeks before Selena had been told she was a top candidate. Her stomach clenched, her face heated. The process had been a performance, a charade. They had dangled hope in front of her, made her play the part of the loyal employee, all while the decision had been locked in from the start. Selena leaned back in her chair, pressing a hand against her forehead. The humiliation she'd felt that day in the conference room twisted into something sharper, betrayal, undeniable, and raw. The next morning, she met Marcus for coffee. She slid her laptop across the table, showing him the email. He read it, then let out a low whistle. Selena, this is your smoking gun. I don't know, she whispered. Even with this, people will say I'm bitter, that I'm making excuses. They'll protect themselves. Marcus shook his head. No, this isn't just about you anymore. This is about every person they'll do this to if no one calls them out. His words echoed the voice already inside her. For the first time, Selena allowed herself to imagine pushing back, not just surviving, but confronting. Later that week, she met with Diane, a senior director she respected, a black woman who had navigated her own share of glass ceilings. Selena shared the email in hushed tones. Diane read it carefully, her jaw tightening. Selena, she said finally, they think you'll stay quiet. They're counting on it. But you have rights. Look into labor law. Document everything. Don't fight this alone. Make them accountable. For the first time since the betrayal, Selena felt a spark of power flicker inside her. Maybe she wasn't powerless after all. Maybe the walls that hemmed her in weren't unbreakable. They were just waiting for someone to hit them hard enough. That night, she sat at her desk again. But this time, instead of drowning in despair, she made a plan. She bookmarked employment law resources. She drafted a timeline of her projects, her achievements, her contributions. And she printed the incriminating email, sliding it into a folder marked simply, Truth. The path ahead scared her. It would mean confrontation. It would mean risking her job, her reputation. But Selena was tired of being silent. Tired of swallowing betrayal like bitter medicine. She closed her laptop, the city lights flickering outside her window. Somewhere in the dark, she whispered a promise to herself. If they won't see me willingly, then I'll make them see me. Selena didn't schedule the meeting out of courtesy. She scheduled it out of necessity. Her email to the CEO's assistant was brief, almost curt. I'd like a private conversation with Mr. Langston regarding the recent promotion decision. Within hours, a slot was cleared on his calendar. Walking into his office, Selena felt her pulse hammering in her ears. The space was sleek, lined with glass walls and framed photos of executives shaking hands with clients. A portrait of Mr. Langston's predecessor hung behind the desk, a silent reminder of legacies passed down to the same familiar faces. "Selena," Langston said, gesturing to a chair. His tone was warm, too warm, like a doctor trying to soften a diagnosis. "I imagine you want to talk about the promotion." "Yes," she replied, sitting straighter than usual, her folder clutched tight in her hands. He sighed, leaning back. "I hope you understand, this wasn't a reflection on your performance. You're talented and valuable, really. But Jessica, she has a certain presence. Clients find her approachable. She has the right image." There it was, the word unspoken but roaring between them. Image. Selena's jaw tightened. "Mr. Langston," she said carefully, "Jessica has been here less than a year. I've managed multi-million-dollar projects for a decade. I saved the Stanton account. I've led teams through crises. If this decision was about merit, my record speaks for itself." Langston nodded, lips pursed, as if humoring her. "It's not just about numbers, Selena. Leadership is about perception." Her fingers twitched against the folder. For a moment, she almost let it slide, like she had so many times before. But then she thought of her mother's words, Marcus's outrage, Diane's steady voice, the interns watching her in quiet hope. Selena opened the folder and slid the printed email across the desk. "Perception, Mr. Langston? Or predetermined decisions?" He frowned, pulling the page closer. His eyes darted over the date, the subject line, the unmistakable list of leadership placements, with Jessica's name already assigned. Silence stretched. "Where did you get this?" he asked, finally, his voice low. "It doesn't matter where," Selena replied, her voice steady. "What matters is that the so-called process was a lie, a performance meant to placate employees while the decision was made behind closed doors." For the first time, Langston looked unsettled. His confident posture faltered, his fingers drumming against the desk. "Selena, you have to understand, these things are complicated. Decisions at this level—" "No," she cut in, her tone sharp. "They're not complicated. They're biased, they're dishonest, and they undermine every person who works themselves to the bone, believing effort matters." Outside the glass walls, employees passed by, oblivious to the storm brewing inside. Langston cleared his throat, lowering his voice. "You need to be careful with accusations like this." Selena met his gaze. "Careful is what got me erased. I won't be careful anymore." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Selena skid, gathering her folder. "You wanted perception? Well, here's mine. This company has a problem, and you can either fix it, or it will fix you." She walked out before he could respond, her heels clicking like a drumbeat against the polished floor. The whispers started almost immediately, rumors trickling through the office about what had just happened behind the glass doors. By the end of the day, HR had requested a confidential meeting. By the end of the week, employees were talking openly in break rooms, comparing stories, murmuring about favoritism. The confrontation had cracked something open. Selena wasn't invisible anymore. The HR meeting was supposed to be quiet, contained. A box checked before the company moved on. But nothing about Selena's presence felt small anymore. She walked into the glass conference room with her folder tucked under her arm like armor, her expression calm but unyielding. Two HR representatives sat across from her, laptops open, smiles forced. One of them, a woman named Karen, started with the usual script. "Selena, we value your contributions. We're here to listen to your concerns and find a way forward." Selena placed the email on the table, sliding it across as she had with Langston. "Then start by explaining this." The air shifted. Their smiles faded. Karen's fingers paused above her keyboard. The other rep, a younger man, leaned forward to read the printout. The date, the subject line, the names, proof that the entire promotion process had been a facade. "This is concerning," Karen said finally, her voice flat. "Concerning?" Selena echoed. Her voice was steady, but beneath it burned 10 years of swallowed humiliation. "It's more than concerning. It's dishonest. It's discriminatory. And if you think I'm the only one who's noticed patterns like this, you're wrong." The younger rep shifted uncomfortably. "Selena, these are serious accusations." "They're not accusations," she cut in. "They're facts. I've given a decade of my life to this company. I've carried projects no one else would touch. I've delivered results again and again, only to be erased when it mattered most. And I'm not going to let you pretend this is anything but what it is. Bias, plain and simple." Silence. Selena gathered her folder, her voice softening but not losing its edge. "This isn't just about me anymore. It's about every employee who believes their hard work will be enough, only to find out the rules were rigged from the start." Within a week, whispers had turned into conversations. Colleagues stopped her in the hallway, voices low but eyes bright with solidarity. "Thank you for saying what we couldn't. I thought I was crazy, but I've seen it too." The pressure mounted. Jessica, who had once smiled at Selena with awkward gratitude, now avoided her gaze entirely. Rumors swirled that she had considered stepping down, overwhelmed by the coldness from colleagues who once cheered for her. Then, in a move no one saw coming, HR announced a review of promotion processes company-wide. Diversity consultants were brought in. Anonymous surveys circulated. And at the center of it all, though never named, was Selena's defiance. 1 month later, Jessica quietly resigned. The announcement was brief, tucked into an internal email. "We thank Jessica for her contributions and wish her the best in future endeavors." Selena read it at her desk, her lips curving into the faintest smile. Not because Jessica had left. Jessica had always been a pawn, but because the silence had been broken. She didn't get the promotion back, at least not immediately, but she got something more powerful: her dignity, her voice, her place as a symbol for others who had been erased in the same quiet ways. Weeks later, she stood on a stage at a workplace equity forum, the spotlight warm on her face. Her voice carried steady across the room. "This isn't just my story. It's the story of countless people whose work is overlooked, whose potential is dismissed because of bias hidden behind words like fit and image. We don't need pity. We need fairness. And we won't be silent anymore." The audience erupted into applause. But Selena didn't need it this time. The victory wasn't in their claps. It was in the fire that had carried her through betrayal into something larger than herself. She wasn't invisible anymore, and she would never be again.
Selena's story doesn't end in the boardroom or the HR office. It continues in the lives of everyone who watched what happened and saw a piece of themselves in her struggle. What she endured wasn't just one unfair promotion. It was the embodiment of an entire system that thrives on silence, on the assumption that people will accept almost enough as good enough. For years, Selena had swallowed her frustration, telling herself that loyalty and sacrifice would eventually break down the walls that hemmed her in. But the day Jessica's name was called proved the truth. Those walls weren't going to fall on their own. They had been built to stand. And the only way to challenge them was to push back, even if it meant risking everything she had built. Her confrontation wasn't neat. It wasn't wrapped in instant justice or sudden recognition, but it planted something larger, a shift in the culture around her. By refusing to stay silent, Selena forced people to look at what they preferred to ignore. She reminded her colleagues, her superiors, and perhaps even herself that fairness doesn't arrive by accident. It has to be demanded. And in that demand, she found her power. Selena's voice became louder than the silence that had once suffocated her. She stood for herself, yes, but also for the interns watching quietly, for the employees stuck in the same cycle of invisibility, for the future she wanted to carve. Her story carries a lesson for all of us, that dignity is not negotiable, that hard work deserves recognition, and that bias, no matter how carefully hidden, cannot withstand the light of truth forever. If you've ever been overlooked, if you've ever felt the sting of being dismissed despite giving everything, remember Selena's story. Remember that silence is the soil where injustice grows. And remember that even in the face of betrayal, you can choose to fight, to speak, to stand tall. Because the promotion that wasn't given to her, it didn't define her. What defines Selena was her courage to say, enough. If this story moved you, if it sparked something inside you, don't let it stop here. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every one. And if you believe in stories that expose injustice and uplift voices that too often go unheard, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell. Together, we can make sure silence never wins.